Hey everybody, welcome back to Career Crash Course. I'm Erica Starke-Knight, here to share these what you need to know if you're considering a career in the media industry. Now, I have been in the business for over 30 years, and so I decided to invite some of my friends who are at the top of their game to stop by for some real talk about their professions. Today's topic is videography and editing, and my special guest is Matt Maisano. So thank you for stopping by and joining us today. We're going to just jump right in.
All right. Yeah. Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Oh yeah. So you are an Emmy nominated producer and XR and videographer producer. And you have worked on produced content for national networks like HGTV, I believe, and Food Network, which is pretty amazing. Tell us rewind back, and how did you even get started to get you to this point? Where'd you go to school and what'd you study?
Oh yeah. I grew up watching movies, so I'm a big movie nerd, and that led me to film school, and I graduated from film school and did a 6 months or so of work on actual movies, doing sound and PA work and all the types of stuff that people do in the beginning. My most memorable was a shoot I did in New York City, which was the first time I'd been to New York City by myself. It was at night, and I was like really confused as to where to go. And it was a romantic comedy, and the couple in the movie was arguing, and the woman was throwing his clothes out the window. And so my job as the PA was to stand downstairs, catch the clothes when they threw them out the window, and run them up like over and over and over again. I questioned my life choices at that moment, but it did work out. And all that to say, I eventually got a full-time job working, as you mentioned, for a production company just outside of New York City. We're basically Food Network and HGTV's production company, and so we did a bunch of national shows for them, and reality shows, cooking shows, and then wanted to do more videography, wanted to get out of the editing side.
Oh, let me stop you really quickly there, if you don't mind. That's what I was about to ask you. So what exactly were you doing at Food Network and these other national networks?
Yeah, and so I was in I was in a production company that's hired. So these big networks, they don't produce a lot of their own content. They hire a production company. And so we were a production company that happened to be, all our work was for Food Network and for Scripps Network and HGTV. And so I got hired as an assistant editor, my first full-time job out of college, and eventually became an editor, and then kind of a shooter, a videographer / editor as I was branching out. And so I was one person on a 3 or 4 person post-production team, but we had, these were larger shoots for national networks with 30, 40, 50 crew members. And then, we would take the footage and process it out and get it edited.
Now, what exactly do you do as an assistant editor? Are you actually sitting there editing? What do you do?
Yeah, so the assistant editor, it's kind of like students may hear the term post PA. They're kind of the same thing, but your job is to essentially, right after the shoot, to gather all the footage, back it up multiple times, copy it to hard drives, organize it, and prepare it for the actual editors, which in our case were people all over the country and sometimes all over the world. And so a lot of my job was, I spent a lot of time packaging FedEx boxes to send hard drives all over the planet and track them. And so it's just, yeah.
But that's all, all helpful information. I mean, you got to learn to do that at some point, particularly in a case like we're in now in a pandemic. You may need to ship things. So all of that is valuable information, but were you able to sit in on the edits and watch the editors work and learn?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so as in that assistant editor role, we had a full-time editor, we had an online editor, which is a whole nother part of editing. There's offline and online, and I can explain that later if you want me to. But like but yeah, I would, when there came, whenever there would be a big project, and the senior editor that was also my office, I would sort of watch him, and he would give me tips, and I would see how he interacted with the EP and the culinary producer and all these people. And it was a great opportunity to just be a fly on the wall and see how a real production environment worked, not just what I had learned in film school, and I had worked in television news as well. I kind of skipped over that, but anyway, yeah, it was a good branch to go from assistant editor and like, oh, now's my chance. If I pay attention and learn, I can edit my own shows.
Now that is a really good point, Matt, because a lot of times students may think they get an internship and they have to be the one down there catching the clothes or, or sending FedEx boxes. But if you're in the room, that's the step. So you get to hear and see how things work. So when you do get your first opportunity, however long that takes, you have that knowledge. So there's some value in just being there to do these, what some would call menial tasks, because you're in the room. Would you agree?
Definitely. Yeah.
So now, how did you tell me some of your highlights before we go back into your career? What are some of your most memorable shoots, your favorite, and then maybe some of the biggest disasters?
Yeah, favorite things. Gosh, a lot of cool projects. I got to, a few stand out. I filmed in my time in the PBS station at UNC TV, now called PBS NC. Two things stand out. I did this one project. We were doing filming it was like a water survey story for the show, the public affairs show. And I, as a videographer, was tasked of going and getting aerial footage. This was before drones were kind of really used much. So I had to go up in a 1942 two-seater airplane with just me and the pilot. The plane had no top on it. It was a open plane. And so literally have the camera out the side of the plane. I'm holding it, but nothing. And the most memorable part of that day, which was so cool, was when it comes time to land, the pilot who's sitting right in front of me goes, so I'm gonna need you to lower the landing gear. I was like, isn't that your job? He's like, pull the red lever to your left.
What?
And sure enough, I pull this lever and the wheels go up. Apparently, I don't see them. So I'm like, did I do that right? And yeah, so there was that going on. But
thank God this is one of the highlights, not one of the disasters, right?
Yeah, it could have been. You're right. But it was just so cool. My point is just, I bring that up just to say, like, how many jobs can you be sitting in this 1942 plane with your camera literally out in the sky, recording footage? And it was just one of those moments that was just, I really was glad to be doing what I was doing. Awesome. Yeah, and but yeah, I was going to talk about your documentary at the in DC. But are we maybe we got to move on to the next question.
How about, that's an awesome story. What about one of your biggest disasters where it may not have been, you caused it, but, a major mishap that you remember and the lesson that you took from that?
Yeah. So the biggest disaster. So as a producer and as a videographer, coming down from the producer, you have to keep your talent happy. And she showed up to work with a licensed image on her t-shirt. It was a Leave It to Beaver shirt. And we had to film a whole episode. There was like 30, 40 people here on set, and this happens. And so the producer has to tells her,
Matt, can you explain before you continue, why is that an issue for people who don't know what a licensed image is and why that's an issue?
Yeah, good point. So in all broadcasting, it doesn't matter whether it's traditional over TV, internet, whatever. You have licensed images are owned by some entity. And in order to use them, you need explicit permission. And if you're dealing with a major license like a Nike or something, it is extremely expensive, and or you may not be able to do it at all.
Or
And
you'll get
so
sued if you use
you
it.
get sued, right? Yeah, and music is a whole nother thing, very expensive. And so anyway, she refused to change her shirt, and so we, the team of 3 of us in the post-production department, spent 4 days frame by frame blurring her t-shirt. And as her hands, it's a cooking show, so her hands are moving in front of her shirt. So you have to take the blur away, put it back, take it back as it was a nightmare.
Oh, wow.
And it cost our company, you think about a 3-person salary for 4 days. It was thousands of dollars that based on that decision. And so anyway, that was a production nightmare.
At least that didn't cause any harm to you. I was afraid when I asked that question, disaster, especially after that first helicopter story, like, oh God, did you fall off a bridge? Disaster. Yeah. Well, you mentioned PBS. You created some content for an award-winning PBS series. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So worked on a bunch of work at PBS station. Did some work on, I was there at a time where we were really trying to figure out how to remain relevant to modern audiences with, the broadcasting numbers going down, of course, and how do we create internet related brands and internet audiences. And so I worked on a show called My Home NC, where I did a lot of videography and editing and some AP work. And yeah, that show went on to win a bunch of awards, and got to work on a lot of really fun projects, like your own documentary on the African American Smithsonian Museum, and just, yeah, a lot of cool stuff like that. So
that's awesome. Now, would you, for someone who is considering a career as an editor or a videographer, what I have found as a producer, talking to my videographers and editors, is if you start out as an editor, you much more appreciate the importance of a videographer. Can you talk about that a little bit and why that's the case, if you think that's true?
Yeah, it is definitely true. Yeah, because I think editing is, in general, one of the best things that a young person can do in their career for a variety of reasons. But to your point, it prepares you for one, it's an easy way to get in, but number 2, it prepares you to go out in the field, to go out and shoot, right? Because as the editor, you're there after the fact, and for all the glory and all the horror. Everyone knows the term "we'll fix it in post," and so, and how
our
broadly
students may not know what that means. You have to share.
Yeah, well, we'll fix it in post, meaning post production, after the shoot, and we'll fix it in post is a blanket statement for any number of things that go wrong during a shoot, and where someone goes, we'll fix it in post. and it is an editor's nightmare. They never want to hear that term. But to get back to your point, is like, the reason editing is so crucial, and I would say early in your career, such a valuable thing to spend your time on, is because should you branch out to other things, if you don't want to do editing full time, it will inform all those things, because you're going to be watching the raw footage, meaning you're going to see what the videographer did. You're going to see how the producer was conducting the interview. You're going to see what locations they picked, what gear they used sometimes, what codec, all the technical information. And so by being at the end of the production process, you're seeing how it all came together.
And so, if you have to edit, we use a phrase often as producers when I'm in the room with an editor sometimes the footage that you delivered will be a lot of lemons, and we have to figure out how to make lemonade. Or there's others that we won't share here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to your point, you know, a specific example is if, you know, you're editing a piece about, you know, a water tower, and the videographer goes out and gets all this great footage of how it's built and put together, and the signage and the location where they're going to build it, and, you know, gets all these interviews and shots around, and you forget to actually shoot a 20-second shot of the water tower. As an editor, you're in there screaming because that's what the story's about. So talk a little bit about that and the importance of whatever the focus of the story is. Get as much of that as possible, please.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're seeing that no editor has ever said, gosh, I wish I didn't have so much great footage to choose from. And so it informs, like you said, it forms so much of what you do, because you're going to know when you're an editor and then it comes time to shoot, or even if you're on a shoot that you're going to be editing and you're not even the videographer, either scenario this applies, you're going to be so prepared to know what those materials are. So if you're making, it doesn't matter if you're making a 2-minute video about a water tower and you have an interview and you have a bunch of B-roll of water and lakes and rivers, and you know that I'm going to need, if I want my shots to be 2 to 4 seconds, you know, I'm going to need 40 shots to cover these 2 minutes, and I'm going to need, you know, this variety I'm going to need, and I need to make sure my interview questions are, I have that much interview content, you know, how many questions do I need? And so by seeing how it all comes together and by learning from your mistakes or the mistakes of someone else that gave you the footage, when should you transition, you're going to be so much better prepared. And you also, as Erica knows, like when you're in a production, and particularly when you're on a very limited schedule, you're dealing with high profile talent, and you only have certain amount of time or certain amount of budget, or both. It's not just about what you choose to shoot and spend your time, it's about what you choose not to. And what you don't, this person, you know, vineyard owner wants me to come 3 hours and spend shooting at their location because they want to show off their winery or something. You're like, I only need 2 shots of that, so I'm going to be there for 30 minutes. And so it's just that type of stuff.
Yeah. And that's a good point too. When you're out as a videographer now and you're going out to get a story, everyone gets so excited that a camera person is coming and they want you to shoot this and shoot this and shoot that. And you have to be able to diplomatically, as kindly as you can, say, I'm sorry, we don't have time to spend 45 minutes talking to the mayor because we're on a schedule and the story is about X. So you have to be able to, if you don't have a producer with you, right? You got to be able to know how to talk to these clients and keep things on schedule.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you say? All right, I'm going to get to some of these rapid fire questions. What would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions about being a videographer?
The biggest misconception, that's a good question. That it only involves hitting record on a camera and, you know, pointing at things and filming them, or even that it only involves picking, you know, operating a camera. Being a being a videographer is, yes, first and foremost, you want to create beautiful images, but that's the part everybody knows. The part that people don't know is, probably say just as much important, is making people comfortable and improving your social skills. And so I say to young people, spend time on your social skills if you want to be a videographer, because they are crucial tools.
That's right. Because if you make them mad or whatever, if you don't know how to handle a meltdown or what have you, the story's going to pot.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good segue to my next question. What would you say are 3 must-dos before you go on a video production shoot as a videographer?
Must-dos. Charge your batteries, wipe your memory cards, and make sure all your equipment's still working.
Before you leave. Good point.
Before you leave.
Oh,
The night
gosh.
before, not the same day.
Right, that's right. Yes, yes, yes. And how about once you get on location, what are the absolutely do not do, or before you go?
Yeah, once you get on location, or before. Oh, before, yeah.
Yeah, either one. What are the don't do this? 3 of those.
Yeah, have a backup for your key items. Don't forget to have a backup, basically, and that might mean a backup camera, a backup tripod, backup batteries. But then when you get there, be careful and don't break things, and be purposeful and take your time. You're dealing with expensive equipment, and make sure you don't go too fast and rush.
Good, because when you're rushing and can stay on a schedule, you can absolutely forget things.
Yeah.
Good point, Matt. All right, so what are the pros and cons? There are a couple of editing systems that I know, Premiere versus Final Cut Pro. I learned on Final Cut Pro. So what are the pros and cons for each, and which do you prefer?
Yeah, I use Premiere. I prefer that. I started on Final Cut as well, and loved the old Final Cut, but I can't speak too much to the current Final Cut, but they're both really good. Final Cut has some, from what I know, better built-in tools to send things out to social media and publish content really easily. That's a strength of it. So if that's in your workflow, you may want to check that out. Premiere is really good because it ties into a whole suite of software like Photoshop and After Effects, and so you have these connections to other programs, which are really helpful.
Okay, cool. All right, so for the students who are watching this, if you could create a starter kit, if I wanted to be a videographer, if they want to be a videographer and pursue a career in that industry, what 3 items would you put in that starter kit?
Okay. And money is or is not an object?
Well, let's do the money is not an object first. Or sorry, money
Okay.
is. These are students on a budget. So on a budget, what's the best prosumer items that you would put in that starter kit?
Okay, yeah. I would say I'm a big fan of Panasonic's GH5 GH camera line, and so I would go with those. They're really affordable, and the image quality is fantastic. And so I would pick a kit around that and just get a basic tripod. The Satchler Ace is a nice one that I have, and a basic microphone. Just get your camera, tripod, and one kind of microphone, a Rode shotgun mic to go on the camera, or a Sennheiser lavalier mic, and those are their basic elements. You can add a light later, and you can kind of build from there.
Great. And what would be where would you suggest to buy this kind of gear at an affordable price for someone starting out?
Yeah, good question. I love I'm a Northeast person, so maybe I'm biased, but B&H and Adorama are like video gear paradises. And if anyone's in New York City area, go to B&H, but go there, and don't be afraid to look for used equipment. You can save a lot of money, and it's oftentimes in great shape.
And just in case some folks don't know what prosumer means, can you explain that?
Yeah, prosumer means a combination of consumer and professional. It's where the two meet, and so it's a nice balance for people that don't have too much of a budget, but they want something better than the average person.
Nice. So if you can't afford this equipment, what suggestions would you give someone to sharpen their skills on becoming a videographer?
If they don't have access to it.
Correct. What are some do-it-yourself ways you can sharpen your skills in becoming a videographer? which they
Yeah.
probably all know. But
Yeah,
people we're
no, it is a
talking
good
to.
question. Like, just watch content. Just watch content, take notes, pick your favorite movies and analyze them. And then if you only have a smartphone, get a little tripod for it. They're really cheap, and just play around with your smartphone, and you can learn a lot from there.
And what about as an editor? How can you, would you say iMovie, or I don't know if you don't have a Mac, what would you say?
Yeah, iMovie, yeah, for Mac folks. There is a free Windows equivalent. I can't remember the name, but there are a lot of tools out there that are very, very affordable, and it doesn't matter if they don't have all the features. You just want to get in there and start creating things.
Yeah. I remember an executive producer told me early on, I learned how to edit very early in my career. And the instruction I was given was to go home and turn on the TV and turn the sound off and watch how often the shots change, and
Yeah.
notice, that you don't get bored because you keep switching. And he referenced, gave the analogy, it was like a water faucet running water. If you just stay on something too long, people zone out. And that goes with a long-winded interview or just staying on a shot for a long time. But when you turn the water off, get your attention again. Same with changing shots. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, just practice with. That's like pacing is really what you're talking about. Learn pacing and
Yeah.
learn how to keep viewer interest through that.
So is there a must read or a must follow or a must watch for people interested in either videography or editing?
Uh, I would say first and foremost, watch your favorite content again and pause it and watch it again over and over. But in terms of specifics, I really like this person on Instagram called Sam Wooz, Wooz, and I think he does amazing time lapses and videography, and I nerd out on time lapses.
I love it. So what is, considering as the length of time you've now been in your career, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
To not focus so much on the technicals and remember that at the end of the day, even though these are careers in video and TV and film, you're dealing with people, and to spend more time on your people skills, on your interpersonal skills.
Good to know. So as an adult, Matt Maisano, what would your adult self, which might be the same advice you just shared, but what would your adult self tell your college aged self now?
Yeah, they are similar, but actually the one thing I would pick though is to not define your career in a box that you have to do, or some example, the popular example of how to have a career. You can make there are a lot of ways to have a successful career, and different ones work better for different people.
So would you have done something differently in college or taken different classes to prepare you?
Um, it's more of not in college per se, no, just maybe um, realize that after college that there are so many ways in which you can get to the place you want to be. You don't have to follow any kind of cookie cutter ideas of what employment is.
That's a great segue to my next. So obviously there are lots of cookie cutter scenarios when you're working for companies, but once you've been in the industry for as long as you and I have, you can branch off and start your own company, which you have done, Big Toe Media. What made you decide to take the leap? And have you found that you get just as much work, if not more, under your own company?
Yeah. For me, I had, I realized that, yeah, that's what was right for me, to take the leap. I saw that, my career wasn't progressing as fast as I wanted to, and had more limitations than I wanted to on things I could work on, and projects. And so it's a good, being an employee and starting your own business are totally different worlds, but for different people, they're the right answer. Each one can be the right answer. And for me, working for myself was the right answer.
Awesome. And what I found, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts too, is I started my own company also, but I had worked for people for so many years, been in the industry for 30 years, and made so many contacts and connections, and really did strive for excellence. So people know you and not necessarily the company you work for. So when you go off on your own and your clients find out, I found quick to come and hire you. Have you had that experience?
Yeah, exactly. You said it well. Like, I wouldn't recommend someone in their 20s, unless they were really, really successful right away, um, to go and try to start their company. Because when it comes time to do that, if that's your path, you want to have that network in place, and that network was built by being an employee at a bunch of other companies,
Mhm.
like you said, and that's going to be your anchor, because
Mhm.
when you work for yourself, you need to have an anchor.
Yeah. And what I also love about your profession, videography and editing, I mean, it exposes you to so many different things. And certainly the pandemic has opened up lots of things, but you found that were really interested in pursuing XR. And with your own company, you could do projects like that. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the things that, yeah, that made inform my decision to work for myself. And so, you have more choice. And so I really wanted to pursue things like augmented reality and creating educational and interactive applications and all kinds of things like that. And so that's an exciting new branch of video and content making. And it it's just a possibility that you can explore when you're in charge of your own time. And so that for me has been fun to see what we know, the ways we've been using video and editing video in the past. What are the new ways, what are the new formats in which we can share content with audiences?
And what are some cool XR, and explain what XR is to people? That's augmented reality, right?
So XR is like a blanket term for AR, VR, and MR, which is virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. And it's just this lingo, people trying to sound cool, I guess. But
I had never heard MR.
yeah, right. Isn't that a medical device? That's an MRI. But so yeah, it's like there's this sub industry within video and within media that's kind of emerging. USA Today is a fantastic team. I recommend students check out what they do with XR. They are one of the leading teams. And but it's just, that you got virtual reality headsets and it's basically a merger of technology and video, of software and video, and that's what's interesting to me.
Awesome. Well, before I let you go, I've asked each of my guests who have participated in this career crash course how your skill set has stood the test of time during the pandemic. So talk a little bit about how you were able to pivot and create, what you're doing now, which is these virtual studios that you're providing for clients.
Yeah, the pandemic has forced everyone in this business to transition, to figure out what they can do during the time. And
Which is
so
great for you because you're a techie.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I was like, I'll just be honest with the audience. Like, I was on unemployment for a while in the beginning, and it's one of those moments in your career where you really have to decide, how am I going to move on to the next step? I'm going to dig myself out. And I got a call to do a live stream event, and I knew nothing about them. And I just said, yeah, I can do that. Sure. And so it branched into this business. The cornerstone of my business now is doing these things that there wasn't a lot of need for them before the pandemic. And so, but now I run events out of my home studio, and
And
it's
we're
been
talking about
really,
live stream events.
yeah,
I mean, all
live
over the
stream
country,
events
right?
all over the world now. Yeah, I have a couple of clients outside the U.S. now, and so yeah, it's really enabled. people, which is great for students. It's really leveled the playing field in terms of being in LA or New York or, Atlanta or Chicago, like major cities. You can be anywhere and be a part of a production. And that's pretty cool.
That is very cool. And just because you're running this out of your home does not mean you're not generating some pretty good revenue. You and I were talking before, a lot of these companies who have annual conferences or retreats where they're flying in their employees and paying for their hotel and their travel and food and beverage. Now they can put all that money into someone who's running a virtual studio and live stream business like Big Toe Media, right? And make some big toe money.
Yeah, you're right. It's changed the industry drastically, and it's allowed clients to pay for different things. And so it's created an opportunity for people in the production world to jump in and fill this huge demand.
Yeah, and speaking of huge demand, I have to tell this funny story before we leave. You and I worked on one of those live stream projects together, and the client said to me after the fact, he had to put on this virtual event or this annual event, and there were so many people who are in that space now because of the necessity, and he didn't have the time or the desire to interview and send me resume tapes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he just chose the most expensive one, which was your company.
Yeah.
Which was awesome, right?
Yeah, I mean, it goes to show you. I mean, we could have a whole conversation on pricing your services, but yeah, sometimes people should charge what their value is, and know that sometimes the client is going to see that and think that it means that they're good at what they do, and because if they weren't, they wouldn't get clients at that price.
That's right. And the operative phrase there, everybody who's listening, make sure you're good at what you do, because the client also said that he agreed that was money well spent.
Yeah, thankfully.
Yes, I'm delighted that you're doing well and that you shared all these nuggets of info with our viewers, and I wish you well.
Thanks, Erica. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time, be well.